Hey everybody, guess what? Monday night, it's time for Disputed Lands. Man, I can't tell you how stoked and excited I am to finally track down. I had to put some lead in his shoes before he got him put on in the morning, but I finally got him to sit still long enough for a Disputed Lands show. Tonight, I'm of course joined by my co-host, Ian the Duck, the Almighty's Duck, Fiaducci. Ian, thanks for being here. And of course, our special guest tonight, Gary Wayne. Gary, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and don't be afraid to invite me back. So I think we're going to have a wonderful show tonight, and I think we're going to talk about things that people, their eyebrows are going to raise a little bit.
I think so too. I've used all the lead to keep you down long enough for this show for your shoes this time, so I'll have to go get some nails to tie you down for the next one. Now, I put that on my list here for the next show. But Ian, thanks for being here too, brother. How was your week?
It's been busy.
It's been busy. Yeah. Been busy. Well, you know, that's how it is. Hey, folks, if you didn't catch it earlier, you're just tuning in tonight for the first time to any kind of media, go to Dr. Mike Live and catch that interview. I had the pleasure of sitting in as the guest host on his show, Dr. Mike Live, where I interviewed Derek and Sharon Gilbert. That was a treat for me and an honor for me and a privilege for me that Dr. Mike allowed me to do that and sit in for him. But go to Dr. Mike Live and you can catch that in the archives there. But tonight we are talking to Gary Wayne. Gary, I think for our audience needs no introduction. If you've watched any kind of Christian TV in this area or genre, you have seen Gary, heard an interview, or what. However, even though it's been, I think, 4 years since his book has been out, approximately around 4 years, maybe a little bit longer, and you think you've heard all the interviews, tonight we are going to be discussing some things that Gary has written about or knows about that actually has been brought up a lot in any of the previous interviews. It intertwines, it's still along the lines of his research. But tonight, Gary, we're going to talk about just how the heck did we go from monarchies in Europe to the Western-style democracies that we have now that have pretty much reigned in the majority of the earth today. So we're going to start off with that question. I have a follow-up question, of course, for that, but I'm going to let you hit it off, Gary, and then we'll see where the questions go from there. Ian may have some questions he wants to interject as well. But let's set the stage. So in Europe, we have these provinces. They're really kingdoms, monarchies, and there are many of them. There's the principal bigger ones, but there are many of them throughout Europe. How in the world, first, did we get the monarchies? And then why all of a sudden did the monarchies just go away into the Western style type civilization governmental structures? Now, I believe, and I think you would agree, that this was not done in an accidental way. These families just don't willy-nilly and wantingly give up seats of their power. And we don't believe that they have per se. But why are we seeing these kind of government structures that we do today versus the? Take us on that journey. What you start where you want on that, but let's delve in and tackle this topic.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that it's a complex question that, you know, has a lot of different sort of arms and reaches to it. So I'm going to just sort of bring it back to the beginning and talk about that sort of organizational structure of reigning and ruling, and look at how that came about, how that rolled forward, how the idea of what has been going on over the last, say, 250 years, because really since the beginning of America, which is one of the key sort of gambits that has, you know, rolled in a domino effect in the West, not necessarily in the same model around the world, but and sort of piece it together as to what's going on in that sort of world. So let's look at the organizational structure that has been sort of ruling since the flood, and I would say even before the flood. So after the flood, you get the kingships being usurped by the Rephaim, which are the post-Diluvian Nephilim. And so these Rephaim tribes and families are going to set up the original major kingships. And they're the same ones that will develop the major empires, the beast empires. So whether or not it's Babylon or it's Persia or it's Greece or it's Rome or the coming beast empire, these are the bloodlines of these original Nephilim bloodlines that take control of the countries and then start creating larger empires. And their larger family, let's say both into the religious class for the priests and for the nobility class, are going to be all cousins, so to speak. And then you're going to set up what we would understand from the Middle Ages is like the feudal society. So you have this whole reigning religious class and warrior class, nobility class, and kings that are all basically extended family. And the mundane, the poor, the humans, the ones that are not considered to have the bloodlines, they're the ones who are basically living in a slave class. And this is sort of what sort of rolls forward to, into the Middle Ages. And lo and behold, there's an organization that's going to be created that is going to sort of move everything forward in a way that's going to change how everything's done, even though the goal is to bring it back to what it was. But there's a goal they have in mind. So this is the organization that's called the Knights Templar. And the Knights Templar are made up of partly, there's 2 Cistercian or Benedictine monks, which are part of the nobility class, and they're part of the Gnostic orders that are molded within Catholicism. And then you have the rest, which are the bloodlines. So some of the major ones in that bloodlines would be the Anjou, which create the Plantagenet. You have de Payon and de Bouillon, and they live alongside in the same area in the Lorraine region with the Anjou. And so, and they take their bloodlines back to the Merovingians and back to Nephilim, and also try in their occult belief system Sion in Josephus, who's the son, they say, of Mary Magdalene and Jesus, not what I believe, what they believe. So that they've got all of these ennobled bloodlines that are coming in. And this organization is Christian on the outside and it's Gnostic on the inside, and it's led by adepts. So it's a secret society, and this secret society, in the doctrines that they set out by the Master Roncelin, and I've got quotes for people if people want to understand where that comes from in the exact article, they're trying to take over the Catholic Church and prepare it to become the new Babylon that's going to work with the bloodlines, right? So they want this Babylon with their bloodline rulership over the whole world, not just Europe, right? And that requires the universal church. That's going to be the catalyst to bring this about. So, but the Templars, they get taken apart in 1307. And of course, now they're going to disseminate into a whole bunch of different secret societies. The Rosicrucians are going to be one of the key ones that's going to organize Freemasonry, which is made up by the St. Clairs, who are the St. Clairs, who was a battle partner and one of the hidden members of the Templar Order, Henry de St. Clair. You have the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians creating the Royal Society. You've got the Illuminati, you've got the Jesuits, you've got the Rothschilds banking system, and everything's designed to reset up what the Templars were doing. And remember what the goal is, okay? But as things are moving along, you have a changeover from one of the most ennobled bloodlines that they call the Unicorn Dynasty in England. That comes from Scotland, which is the Stuart dynasty, which is they marry into the daughter of Robert the Bruce to bring in the Stuart dynasty, and it is a scion of all the ennobled bloodlines, and they're protected by the St. Clairs. And the de Bruces go back to the same family of the St. Clairs, because that is the Rollo family that expropriates Normandy from France in about 912, and they call that treaty the Treaty of St. Clair, and that's where then the Rollo family takes their name. So what's going on here is now you have the Stuart dynasty, which is going to take control of the English dynasty. So nothing real big at this point in time, just sort of the jostling around of all of these different bloodlines and stuff. And you've got major bloodlines in Germany, Russia, France, wherever. But then what happens is that you have this religious strife that's going on. And now you have the Catholic Church that's also involved in terms of trying to dominate that throne, because Henry VIII has, created his own church with the Church of England. And so you've got this power vacuum. But what happens is the Stuarts from Scotland get thrown out. Now they get in some Stuart bloodlines temporarily that are Protestant from Holland with the Orange dynasties, but it's going to be replaced just to get rid of all of this politics, war, fighting for power, mixing up of religion. They are going to replace them with a German bloodline, the Hanovers. Right? Now,
who's they?
They. It is what I would call, within the bloodlines, you have different bloodlines battling for dominance. It's not
Correct.
always a synchromeshed organization, because they all want to be the absolute controller. So what's going on here is that the people are not wanting the Catholic Church to have control, and so they want the Catholic Church removed from England again, and the Stuarts, for whatever reasons, are basically representing Catholic sponsorship, even though you still got the Church of England, but it's
now,
causing civil war, right?
Yeah, this is all with you're talking about the time of Mary, Queen of Scots. She was married to the King Henry, or was it Francis of the French guy? I can't remember his name. The French king at that time. So it was Mary, Queen of Scots, and then you had Elizabeth, all descendants of King Henry VIII. All I'm saying is that at this time. At that time frame. Okay.
Right. And so they're going to remove them, and the Stuart family are going to move under the protection of the French king, who is obviously Catholic sponsored and controlled.
Correct.
Right. And that's the Jacobite movement, right?
Okay. Yes.
Right. That's the organization that was in power, and the Jacobites are the Masonic movement. And that's when you start to have Masonry that moves into continental Masonry with the Jacobite movement. And then the French kings are going to sponsor wars to try and get the throne back, right? But to settle everything, they bring in the Hanover German dynasty. Doesn't really matter. They're still all cousins, right?
Right.
All of Europe is cousins. They all intermarried right up to World War I.
Exactly.
But now the control of what the English, Scottish, and French secret societies and bloodlines were planning to do, that's been removed, right? It's been replaced by a rival faction and sponsors, which is going to take their bloodlines back to, with the Austrians, and right back to Romania and the Scythian branch line, and an old sort of bloodline, even though they're intermarrying. But they're always fighting, and even below with the kingdoms, it's always a little bit chaotic, because they're kind of fighting in between them, but they're all maintaining this feudal class. But this is also ending with, in this time period, that feudal order, right? And so what they're trying to do is say, if we can't be in England at this point in time, then how do we move forward? How do we move forward now with our agenda, and how do we perhaps strike back at the rogue German takeover again? Because again, you've got German history on the throne back to Saxony with the Saxons, right? So again, but it's been a while since that's happened. But the secret societies and the bloodline orders are saying, how do we stop this, and how do we get England back, and then how do we also move forward on our agenda, which comes from the Templars, to get a universal religion and a world government. So they're going to set up the United States, get control of that using it in the founding of the U.S. constitutional wise, original presidents, most of the people signing it, writing of the Constitution, heavily Masonic. And in Indiana, you know all about that, right?
Oh, absolutely. We got the largest Scottish Rite temple, I think, in the United States, right here in Indianapolis. It's a beautiful building, but it's absolutely an evil place to be. I'm just go. But anyway,
so the concept is essentially this is where it starts to bring back in the Catholic Church is in America, having any sort of alliance or influence from Rome is going to be taboo. So they're not going to try, they want to make sure there's separation of church and state, but what they're really after is separation from Catholic influence, and to build an example, a look at how they kind of envision the new Atlantis, which they call America. That you want to have a strong central government of individual states all working together. And they're going to build America to be the hammer that is going to bring about this world. But it doesn't come easy and it doesn't come quickly, right? And by World War I, America is just starting to come into its own, but they're not even part of this civil war that breaks out between a major split of the East and the West monarchies that are battling for power. But it's designed to overthrow Russia. It's designed to overthrow Germany. It's designed to overthrow the Habsburgs and the Romanian bloodline, so that you don't have this united force that's stopping them. But what they're going to do is keep control behind the scenes of the governments through their secret societies that they put in place everywhere. Problem is places like Russia go rogue. Then they create Germany to take care of, with the Nazis to take care of the Russians, and that goes rogue, and these governments become chaotic. The other thing that they learn over in America is that the Protestants, which they didn't count on when they set this up because it wasn't such an established, huge wave of force and people and populace and influence, aren't going to permit non-Christian religions to take over, just as the Gnostics didn't want the Catholics to control the government. So now you have this country that's going rogue in America with the Protestant movement that is pushing back. So what has to happen, even though they're rolling forward with these democracies to try and roll over in Europe and then export that to the rest of the world to create these states, is that they're finding unless it's a one-party state, they don't have total control. They can't control it. So that's why they're moving it back to a fake democracy with propaganda from the media and one-party government, so that you get this superficial look of a democracy as what they have in China or what they have in Russia. That's what they want today to get the United States under control, because they can't create world government today with America opposing it, right? They have to get recontrol of America to make the world government happen. So that's going to have some significant changes, and we see how they're doing it today. It's happening before our eyes that you're only getting one point of view out of the media. They're basically turning anybody that doesn't believe in the left into hate groups and racists, and it's going to just escalate that way. But that's kind of how we got there. And what they've been doing in the process for the last 30 years is how do we get control of this, so that when we're ready to bring about the universal religion and bring about the 10 leaders that are going to represent these trading blocks, spheres of influence, empires, blocks of nations, whatever you want to call them, that they will send one representative to that council. That will be part of the 10 kings. But it's going to take the universal religion to permit that to come about, and a whole bunch of catastrophes.
Ian, I don't want to jump in here. Do you,
Go
any
ahead.
questions here come to mind before I?
Well, I thought it was pretty neat how he's tying in the whole ecumenical movement here, which we're definitely seeing take place already. This unifying of the world religions, if you will, the false version of Christianity mixing with everything else, which is really not new under the sun. However, we are seeing this progression towards that end times thing. So a couple of things that caught me off guard, other than the fact that we're talking monarchs, elite, and politics instead of mystery creatures and Nephilim as much. You were mentioning the Jacobite cause being connected to the Masons.
They are the Masonic movement.
Right. This is the first time I'm ever hearing this. I'm sorry if I'm the oddball out on that. Chad's probably laughing at me over there, but I studied Scottish history all as a kid, and it's taken me back listening to you talk about this because it's been years since I've studied Scottish history. I was really big into the clans and all the different symbols and the inter clan battles. I'm very familiar with the Jacobite cause, but I've never heard of it. And you know, looking back now, it makes sense. But I'd love for you to send some links or send me some information or something like that on how I can.
Well, here's the reason, Gary. You can correct me if I'm wrong. When we read history, and you watch the television show or read the books about what happened, you're given the superficial face value of
Sure.
desires for power. Okay, the real motives for why those things are being done are never spoken out loud for the television or the book for everybody to read. It takes understanding the history and the knowledge, which they, as family members, teach their children in their schools. From the divine right to rule was taught to their children. I mean, it's just a part of who they were, the divine right to rule. You are the son of a king. You're the daughter of a king. It's your divine right to rule. And this is your history. This is how you got here. This is why. And there's no question to it. And, you know, so their family lineage, it's our desire to have our bloodline on the throne and all that. So
I'm not surprised that it was suppressed and not shown. Like you're talking about the propaganda, the agenda. I'm not surprised by that. I'm just interested if he could give me some links or some information where I can see those tie-ins.
Yeah. So let me just, and I'll come back to that just in a second, Ian. So when you look at that divine right to rule, that is the divine representative of the polytheist God's right to rule, as they believe that, right? And so when they are, everything that they do is based on that sort of thought. And that's one of the reasons why the Stuarts got into, so much trouble. And that was, King James, he was the one who was really imposing that divine right to rule. That just shows you that even though they're on the surface, again, showing this Christian gloss, underneath, they're polytheists, right? And so when you have the notion that everybody thinks this was all about Catholicism, and I'm going to come back around to that in a second so I can get back to the other question, is that's just the superficial gloss. What is going on is a polytheist agenda led by polytheist kings and their bloodlines to do the things that they're doing it and to diminish Christianity by doing so, because they're blaming the Catholic Church. Not that the Catholic Church is innocent on that. And I'm going to come back to that in a second, but to go back to some of the sources, Albert Mackey is a great source, a writer in the 1800s and he's up there with the patriarchs of modern Freemasonry in writing the reading. Look up Albert Mackey. Knights and Lomas are Masonic historians. They write all about it. But what I like about what Mackey does is he puts forward the information from the Polychronicon and their hidden history, and they have exactly recorded for their members, the adept members, who each people were and what their groups were and how they played, including the Jesuits, which I'm going to lead into next. And I also write about this in my book, so you get a good sort of understanding from the book, and those references will be in the endnotes and the bibliography. So you can track that sort of backwards from there. So we need to remember, though, again, what the Templars are trying to do. So, but they're no longer part of the church, right? Even though you've got the Benedictine Knights and you've got the Calabrian Knights and you've got all of these monastic orders that are Gnostic within the Catholic Church.
Malta.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Knights of St. John. Yeah. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
sister, you know, they're all, and that one's still controlled by Rome as well as, you know, Queen Elizabeth, but that's the Protestant side. That's not the side that's reports to the Pope. And this is important, so I'll connect that. But to be part of the Knights of St. John or the Knights of Malta and the Hospitallers, you have to be a bloodline. And it's usually not the first son, it's usually one of the lower sons, and you have to be, to run it, or in the upper echelon, the adept level, you have to come from royal families. And they're serving the Catholic Church. So when they lose influence on control of the Catholic Church, you're going to get some popes that rise up that are going to push back against the royal families and the bloodlines and the Gnosticism that's in the church. So they have to recreate a new order in there. So they're going to recreate what they call the New Templars. And so 33 individuals that call themselves the Invisible Ones are going to sit down with the Pope in 1317 and try and get this done. And he says, we can do it, and we're going to run it with 33 individuals as what you're trying to represent, but not with your bloodlines and not with your religion. We're going to do it from within the church. And they say, no, we're not going to do that. These invisible ones are the Rosicrucians. But at the upper level, which are part of the higher orders above that, which are all purebloods. The lower half of the Rosicrucians, as that order develops, are not purebloods. They may have bloodlines or they may be extraordinarily talented, but they've come up through the ranks. But the Rosicrucian is the intersection between the lower secret societies like Freemasonry, the Illuminati, and all the ones intertwined in it with the purebloods. So they're going to set up a group in 1540-ish called the Jesuits, and these are the New Templars. And they're going to get back control of it, even though they're sponsoring Ignatius of Loyola, who's a Basque and who's a bloodline type that gets pushed out by the Western families that come into Europe. And they believe they actually call themselves Homo Atlantis. And they believe that after the flood, they started Egypt, Scythia, and the Mesopotamian region as civilizations, as well as settling into northern Spain and southern of France. So they sponsor Ignatius of Loyola, and by 1570, there's going to be a fellow with the last name of Borgia, Francis Borgia, who's going to take over and be the third leader of the Jesuits. Well, he is the leader of an order called the Montesa Order, which takes over from an order called the Calatrava Order that's, again, created at the same time around when the Knights Templar and St. John are created and all the other orders. But the Montesa Order is created in 1317 as well by the Spanish royal bloodlines, and they take over the Templar assets in Spain, just as this is going to happen with another order in Spain. And some of the stuff goes to Scotland, and a lot of the money goes to Switzerland, where the Knights of St. John are going to set up the banking system. But what happens here, though, is and Borgia is also part of the black nobility of the Pope bloodlines and the black nobility of Italian, which they call themselves, and they take their bloodlines back to the gods, polytheist gods, through Julius Caesar and the gods of Rome. But anyways, they now have with this bloodline order control of the Jesuits, right? And from there, they get control of the banking, and control of the education, and control of teaching the priests, so that they can start moving into the direction of the end time with the universal religion, the New Babylon, with the New Templars, which are the Jesuits that they get control of within like 30 years of its introduction. But they get so powerful and start to get so rogue and start to bump heads against the royal families and other orders that they take them out. So by the late 1700s, early 1800s, they are basically wiped out. But with the rise of the Mary apparitions, which is a rabbit hole I know we don't have time to go down to today, and understanding that the Jesuits and Ignatius of Loyola, he starts that order because of Mary apparitions, and he's going to be the soldier within the church to bring about this change to the church, to bring about the new Babylon. That's his instructions from this Mary apparition. And and what happens is that the Jesuits get reorganized, but with very limited control, so that they're not affecting royal families and getting out of control. But by about 17 or 1870s, they're reinstated with all the power and bulls that they had before. So then they start the rise back to power. So now they're working more in conjunction with the royal families again at their direction, and they're going to eventually get where we are today, a Jesuit pope leading the church in preparation for this new Babylon. So directionally, they kind of work in the same direction, right? But there can only be one royal family that's going to produce Antichrist.
Yeah,
and that's where the bumps and grinds come.
Yeah, and that's my question really today. And you'll have to forgive me on my ignorance of this. When it comes to Canada, it seems like they have full control over there with who they got reelected there here just recently. It seems like it's a non-issue there, but with the Catholic Church in general in the Western Hemisphere, not so much as in the South, which is in mostly chaos, but in the West, specifically, I guess it would be the United States, it seems like the Catholic Church ability to affect outwardly any kind of change is waning.
Is
not
limited.
To make any kind of pun on your name, but
yes. But here's the thing: is you're watching what they want you to watch, right?
That's what my question,
So
I guess, was left unsaid there. It appears, it has all appearances of waning, but are we really seeing a waning of their power?
No, it's they have to get control and change the Roman Church from within completely, right? And they're doing that. They're changing doctrine, but they also have to be able to bring all the religions in from around the world, right? So they not only do they have to destroy Christianity and leave it with a Christian gloss, just as the Templars would have had a Templar gloss, and many organizations have a Christian gloss, but they've got this polytheist core. They have to also be able to work with the other religions and create a new religion, and they're doing that. Even though they're not a member of the World Council of Churches, they've got something like close to 20 representatives there all the time, working with them on rewriting the doctrines. And anybody who's familiar with what goes on with these meetings as they're trying to find common ground is everybody's told they have to compromise on doctrine to create this new set of doctrines that can have this universal religion with different sects underneath, but they have this core set of beliefs. And so what you see going on is a weakening of the Roman Church. You see a weakening of Protestantism with doctrine changes within Protestant churches as well. And you have this working together with other religions. The trouble is that to bring this about, they need catastrophes and false prophets. One of the things to watch for as some of the markers are these Mary apparitions, which I think is going to be a significant part of it. And the most significant ones that people are familiar with are Fatima and Lourdes. And of course, you have the three prophecies of Fatima, and we don't know what the third one is, but it's got to do with the end time, and they're keeping most of that hidden. But you also have a significant Mary apparition that takes place in Medjugorje in the 90s, and where Mary is mentoring and initiating and teaching a set number of children there. They're the only ones who can see them, but Medjugorje has been fully recognized by Pope Francis with the visions and the apparitions, and they have control over that now. They did that a year ago when they got complete control over that and recognizing all of those visions. What the children have said is that they know what date they will come out and start telling everybody to convert to the one real religion, the Babylon religion, or be destroyed from the face of the earth. And they're going to have 10 prophecies of catastrophes. And if the world doesn't convert, then this catastrophe is going to happen. And they'll continue to happen, as they say. This is what they believe, not what I'm saying, this is what they believe, until the world capitulates to come under this one world religion. And in the meantime, all the work on the doctrinal changes and the decay within the Christian church has been done, and the bridges built to make it an umbrella religion under this polytheist religion with an umbrella of Christian core that probably will be located in Rome, including the Roman Church. So all of this decay and non-influence is just what they need to set up to make the bigger gambit.
Interesting. It seems to me that they should be on the cusp. If you pay attention to the relationships among the people, at least in the Western Hemisphere, and I don't even know that I even know how to put it into words, and that's part of the problem. There is a disconnect, not just from this modern Western society from history and knowledge, real knowledge of it, but even the relationships among each other, the ability to communicate one with another clearly, succinctly, and with deep meaning has been so eroded by our modern technology. And I'm talking about social media, that it seems to me the ability to organize any kind of real defense against any kind of takeover, or spiritual or governmental or otherwise, seems almost insurmountable. I mean, it doesn't seem to me like there would be any struggle against.
So here's again
today.
Yeah. Here's what they need to have in place to have this universal religion and universal government, and have everybody communicating so that they can evolve into gods. That's what they want to do in the New Age. And that requires uniting of the spark of the divine, and they need this universal religion and world government to do that. That's their belief. So putting in the infrastructure is required, and getting people to use it, to be able to communicate, to connect the world technologically, take down the borders, make borders obsolete, is done through things like technologies, just like they use the environmental movement for the same thing. And everything's apocalyptic, like, and we're hearing more and more of it. You know, if we don't get a hold of carbon, we're done by 2030. I mean, this is just going to get even more. This is what they're doing. And then what they have, when they have the infrastructure in place with the technology, getting back to what we were talking about, is then they start to move in to say, how do we control it? Just like they're moving democracy into a one-party state through all the different levers that they have. Now they're starting to control social media in terms of how there's anything to do with Christianity, right-wing politics, anything they don't like. They're starting to restrict, ban, demonetize, and we're going to see more of that. And again, look at the countries where the model is already set, like China or Russia, where people like Google work with those governments in that socialistic, not national socialism type of government that they created with the Nazis. It's the same idea, where you've got corporations working for the agenda of the government and the religion. And they are stifling free speech over in those countries and controlling who can be on the media, monitoring people, hunting people down. They are slowly turning that this way in America. Now they're going to get, and Canada, they're going to get pushback, but they always will move forward, and they will continue to do so. I mean, who would have thought 10, 20 years ago our media would be this ridiculously one-sided?
Yeah, I know, it is amazing. So that leads into the next thing. Here we have to talk, and in Canada, you have to talk of it in terms of presidential cycles, because these are the points of major change within the society as far as the direction the countries will head. So the question then comes to mind, how many presidential cycles do we have before we see it's their opportunity to make this major change?
They would make the change yesterday if they could. They would do it today if they could. They're prepared. The Club of Rome, which answers to the Rosicrucians, and some people say the Committee of 300, which is above them, but it's all purebloods that are amongst the Club of Rome. So it's essentially the upper half of the Rosicrucians. They divided the world up into 10 groups of nations in the late 60s, early 70s. They're the ones who created things like global warming and overpopulation and peak oil and a whole bunch of these things that have been used to propagandize people to accept the world government. The problem is, and they've got 3 antichrists in the West ready to go all the time. So they're ready at any time. The problem is that until the restrainer is removed, they can't bring it about. But the technology keeps advancing. Everything keeps getting put in place until the ordained time. So I think, though, to say that they could actually accomplish what they want, even if the restrainer is removed today, would be a bit of a stretch for them today, because the technology isn't quite there and the complete platform's not yet there. So they're moving forward. And for the end time to be like the days of Noah, then the technology will have to be as great as it was back then, and to be able to build things and do things. And I'm talking about pyramids and, places like Machu Picchu, to things that we can't do today, right? And I think that was accelerated by the fallen angels after the Nephilim were created. So we're seeing that acceleration today. So I think it's becoming closer. So once they've got the technology in place to have AI intelligence in place, the beast image to be able to be put in place, and all of that is there, then the restrainer probably leaves and it all comes about very, very quickly. But you get what seemingly is look like a pushback that isn't always a pushback. So I'm not convinced President Trump, for example, is necessarily anti-global. What he's looking for is a better role for the United States in the same global order. Putin would be the same way. And Putin goes back to the Putyanin bloodline, and his family comes about in the 1800s out of nowhere as a illegitimate son that they typically gave him a last name that was similar to the royal family, and that's the Putyanin. So Putin is a short form of that. I've got a document on people for Putin if people want that, that tracks that back. And those bloodlines go back to the original Kaisers or Caesars of the Ukraine, which is where the Putin family comes from, right back to the beginning of the Russian nation and to the Scythians. So again, it's part of those bloodlines that I was talking about. And so they just want a larger role in this world order. And that's why it's going to be an empire that is like clay and iron that doesn't always mix. And there could be some strongmen with lower level bloodlines along with the other bloodlines, just as Daniel 243 talks about the descendants of the metallic dynasties mixing their seed with humans, right? So this 10 nation empire is going to have a little bit of a mix. But we also need to understand that there's bloodlines around the world. Like you have the Li family, that is where President Xi comes from. Again, I got a document on the Li family and takes it all the way back to the dragon creation gods and back to the original Shah dynasty, which creates all of the dynastic bloodlines and kingships down through China and then branch out to Southeast Asia. That's the Li family. They come from the Shah clan, and they have control today. You have the Yamamoto family, which links back to the Chinese family. You have the bloodlines that people think were destroyed in Central and South America. I won't go through all the names, but they're all in place because they were reinstated within 40 years with full rights after the Spanish and the Portuguese took over, and it intermarried with the European bloodlines. They're all in place and ready to go.
Well, so here's the question then. Do you see then, we know that this 300 million army that comes from the east. Do you see this then happening at the time that they're trying to make this implementation because they want their say, and perhaps they're getting left out of it? Do you see that happening at that crucial time, at the time of implementation?
No, not quite. I don't.
Okay.
So I think you have the 7 years that begin with the covenant in Daniel 9:27, and that's sponsored by Babylon, which comes in first, or the universal religion that's also a city, and also, you know, takes a transaction off everything in business, so it controls all of that, and it sponsors Antichrist to negotiate the covenant to create these 10 blocks of nations, or trading blocks, whatever you want to call them, that the Club of Rome has already set up to reign over. But Antichrist doesn't come to power till the midpoint of the last 7 years, right? Now, the 200 million man war is, I place that just before the Antichrist coming to power in Revelation 9. So you have the empire that's in place beforehand.
Okay.
But because
I just didn't know what you saw as the timing on that.
Yeah, so the mix is this. So I see Russia and India, not necessarily China, because they come together at Armageddon, the kings of the East, for sure. And what I see is that this alliance is the same alliance as the Gog War of Ezekiel 38 and 39, and understanding that it talks about that war being in the latter days, and then you have second Exodus in chapter 39. And this is the same war as Joel 1 and 2, but not Armageddon that's talked about in Joel 3 and 4. And in Joel 1 and 2, it's the same creatures of types of biological, technologically advanced weapons that could be, you know, like a biological horse that's created for war, and other things that are sort of, we're seeing coming together with cloning and transhumanism, but they're the same type of creatures that are shown in Revelation 9, right? And that timing all is before the midpoint. So I think what happens is that Russia, Persia, North African nations, some Central European nations, which would be part of the Gomer area, in terms of the Alliance of Nations, they're going to say, we're unhappy with this New World Order. And we're unhappy that Israel is protected, and that Israel is growing wealthy at this point in time, and they're you know, have such a favored status. And I think that's what's going to cause the war. And then Antichrist, who has been rising to power and becoming famous, I mean, he does receive a fatal head wound at some point in time to fake the resurrection, but he also needs, as a counterfeit, to complete the pedigree, he'll have bloodlines and everything else, to complete the counterfeit, he needs a fake Armageddon. This is that war. He takes credit for that war and comes in and institutes peace, then goes to Jerusalem and gets himself crowned in the temple as the official Antichrist, and sets up the last 3.5 year reign, and shortly thereafter destroys Babylon to set up his own religion. And of course, this is the same time in Revelation 12, where you have the fallen angels being sent, you know, after the war in heaven, sent down to the earth. So all of it comes together for that last 3.5 year for the wrath bowls to be poured out on the world of that time.
And I don't want to ask the next question to jump in if you have one on your mind, brother.
I mean, there was a couple questions, but he went way past them. I don't know if
he's good at that. Oh, Gary's good at filling in the blanks. So the question, I guess, it goes back to the one I was asking. We're looking at presidential cycles. I don't think they're ready yet either. I think that there's still stuff that has to happen. The restrainer obviously is keeping it back. But we're still taking a best educated guess here, looking at the amount of, or I guess the velocity of change within the technological sectors. What time frame are we looking at? And I'm thinking in terms of presidential cycles. Are we looking at 2 presidential cycles, 3 presidential cycles here?
Somewhere between the end of this presidential cycle, which I think probably goes to 2024 with Trump, And Trump is not an antichrist figure. His age probably doesn't permit it, but that doesn't mean his sons may not be. And he wants to have, and he jokes about, ruling for more than one or two terms. I think that what he's getting at is he'd like to have his sons reign after him, just as the Clintons were trying to set up a dynasty, the Kennedys were trying to set up a dynasty. There's this movement to get this sort of dynasty set up into the states where they'll,
I don't think it's going to be permitted. Honestly,
well,
that's my
not on its own, not
on its own,
singular event, right? It's got to be part of the larger mix. So
yeah, I don't think they want to happen what happened with the European societies that we saw in the past. They can't afford to have one family.
We got to get down to one group of nations led by America, who's going to send a leader to be one of the 10 ruling council of the world.
Right.
So it's got to get there. How and when, but it works in conjunction with everything else. I would say between then and a window of, say, 2037, without, trying to get two dates. I just look at that we are in the fig tree generation. And is that generation 40 years, 70 years, or 120 years?
Well,
70 years, which I might be. I think Jerusalem's the key, and that brings that window to around to the 2030s, but it could happen sooner. But I just think there's too many things to do yet.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't think 2 years is way too soon. I don't think 4 years is soon enough. 8 years, I could see the potential for the chaos and the breakdown that's going on now for it to be right then. But I personally can't see it before the next 6 to 8 years myself because of those reasons. Now, on the technological front, you're talking about that framework. Google, I talked about this earlier in the show. Google just announced their quantum computer did something that the previous quantum computers couldn't do.
Yes.
This, to me, is an astounding feat. Now, it took the problem previously was those other quantum computers were under the control and the guise of a government figure. This one is in the hands of a corporation. They have the means of implementation in other nations that a nation or governmental entity didn't have the ability to do.
Exactly.
So this, to me, is the one thing that is triggering for me to say, okay, now that they've done it, just as they put an iPhone in front of everybody's hand, they're going to rush to get this thing in as many different locations as they need to get this framework moving.
Yeah, and what's interesting that they said is that don't expect everybody to have a quantum computer.
They don't need it.
They don't need it. They only need a number around the world.
Exactly.
And have all the existing type of computers or supercomputers feeding off of that.
Which is the reason for the cloud. Right?
Yes, exactly. And they've been trying to get AI to work with quantum computing, because one of the problems with quantum computing, the question that they gave the quantum computer in this last scenario was it would have taken, I don't know how many millions of years for
it was taking a long time. It was like 20,000 years for it to
and they did it, and it did it in a few seconds.
300 seconds it did a 20,000 year calculation for our fastest computer today.
And the problem with quantum computing is that it is too singularly directed. It needs something to take it in more directions at the same time. And that's why they need to marry the AI in it. And one of the things that they say that they're looking for is the Atma particle. And I don't know whether you're familiar with the Atma particle or not, but that comes out of the Vedic and Hindu religions, and all the people in quantum computing are Hindu converted, because they say you need to understand the Upanishads to understand.
If you don't believe Carrie, just call your tech center right now and see who answers the phone.
Yes, good point. Good point. And the Atma particle is this missing particle that they're looking for. It interacts with existing particles, and it is by doing so connecting through quantum entanglement communicating information everywhere all at once. The Atma particle in their belief system out of Hinduism contains all the knowledge of the universe. And so they're looking at the quantum computing not only to get into different dimensions, but to get into different dimensions for a number of reasons. And you can speculate what those reasons are. One could be the abyss, but the other one is that all this information that's in all the different dimensions and all the different universes that can be harnessed by having direct access to this. This is part of that whole part of the equation that they're going to offer with the mark of the beast, I think. Where they need to offer immortality and knowledge, which are their two pillars to being a god.
Yeah, and it's really just so sad. They've worked these men, women, bloodlines, believing what they have, that it's being set up for them, so gullible, when it's always been the entities behind them, just using men's temptation to once they get what they need,
Yeah. Well, what the thing is what's sad about it is that they believe they're being helped, and they know who the entities are that they're talking to.
Yeah.
Right. They know the difference between demons and angels that aren't in the abyss, and they're trying to get the other angels out of the abyss so they can have the end time that they want. But what they don't understand is that these entities are lying to them.
Well, right, exactly. I mean, they're being used, they're being played, and they have been for centuries.
They've been told that Satan is the equal to God in their dualistic religion.
Right.
And that you can win a separate realm where Satan can rule over them as their good god of knowledge and immortality and goodness, as they would masquerade him as an angel of light, or he masquerades as an angel of light.
Mm-hmm.
But so he's going to ask them, Satan and these fallen angels and the demons are going to say, if you want to live in a realm away from God, governed by us, you're going to have to fight for it.
Exactly.
Right? And that's part of the pitch in the end time. But they truly believe that. They believe they can win.
Yeah, and it's so sad because, I mean, we know exactly what happens to them, but the fact that they cling to this, I think, and that they aren't immune from being preached the gospel. You just know that for some of these guys, and some of them have converted it, there has got to be this nagging voice for some of them saying, we're on the wrong side of this.
Yeah. Well, I think, though, what happens is, you get sort of that brainwashing as you go up through Freemasonry and similar sort of organizations of occult. You get slowly sort of brainwashed. But by the time you get access to the information that you're really looking for, everything that they're promising that's at the adept level where you have to swear your loyalty to Satan.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, at that point it's, and I'm sure that there is stuff that they're allowed to see that, nobody in the general public is allowed to see. And I'm not just talking about the spiritual aspects. I'm talking about, real true wizardry, as somebody is saying in the chat, true wizardry, tricks, things that are done, manipulation of physics, wholly within the parameters of what physics do. I have no doubt that some of that goes on, but this great illusion for them is just, it's, I don't know what the word is, but you know where I'm saying.
Well, let me just sort of expand on how convincing those delusions are. I mean, we're warned by Jesus that even the elect will be deceived if that were possible, and they will be deceived. And so if it can deceive even the elect of Christianity, those delusions are very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Gary, I don't know if you've been watching the clock. We're almost out of time, absolutely, tonight already. Okay. But I think we did, we did delve into the kind of the direction that we set out to do. We did hit those topics one pretty big. How did the Western society come about, and why do we see it operating in the way today? I think these are questions that many, even today, if you try to watch your news today, you will be so lost in trying to understand exactly what truly is going on. you'll be left clueless. And I think if you heed, I truly believe this, if you heed the rhetoric coming out of any of them, you're not going to understand what's going on other than what families are fighting.
Yes. And you need to watch what they're actually doing.
Exactly.
Not what they say they're doing, and how they continually cattle herd everybody in the same direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything is designed to get everybody to run into the opening arms of the globalists who are going to solve all of the problems. And that the way that we have done things in the West in the last while is destroying the world, even though we're the beacon to the world. And you look at places like India, Africa, China, South America, they're absolute disasters, right? But yet they're convincing everybody in North America and in Europe that we're the awful ones.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's just, but it's brainwashing, and that will become ever more intense as they get closer to their goal.
Well, Gary, I had other thoughts and questions that were coming to mind, other avenues of this to look at that and intersect on. But as it is, our time is up. I have to go buy some nails to nail you down. We will get you back on here, and we're not going to wait a year to do it. We'll try to set a hard fast within the year to get you back on here. I do thank you for your time. Gary is still a very, very busy guy, still doing interviews left and right. And I'm just so thankful to have you first as a friend, Gary. I appreciate you. We here at Take on the World, you're well loved. You probably haven't seen the chat. I don't know how much of you've seen it. You've been talking.
No,
you're so well loved here, and we thank you for your time. We're very happy you joined us this evening.
Well, thank you for having me, and hopefully I was able to explain it in a way that sort of made sense. That there's there's those rival factions, but directionally they're all trying to go and get there. It's just what role are they going to be playing, and how do they get there? How do they bring this whole thing about? Because it's just not good enough to have world government and control. They need that religion. They need to take it back to that antediluvian religion that destroyed that world.
Well, there were many here who said, man, you guys are going through this quick. Can you dumb it down for me? And here's what you need to do, folks. Just go get Gary Wayne's book. It's 600 plus pages, but every page is worth the penny of that book. Just go to his website, get the book, read it so you can understand he paints the big picture for these families, why they're doing what they're doing, who was involved to bring us here today. And, I think if you get that along with my book, and here's an interesting thing, folks, if you go to Amazon, if you type Gary Wayne's book for almost 2 years running, the #1 recommended book to buy with Gary Wayne's book was The World in the Bondage of Egypt Under the Triumphal Arch of Titus by a guy by the name of Chad Schaefer. Those two were recommended by hand in hand, and I couldn't agree with Amazon on that point more. Get those two books, and you'll have a good picture of what's going on.
Exactly.
All right, Gary. Well, thanks again for being on. I'm Chad Schaefer, and this has been who over there in the corner?
Oh, Disputed Lands. Are you asking me to finish the sentence?
And it's been Ian. This is where you say, and Ian Fiaducci.
Yeah, the duck. Sure.
The duck. Disputed Land. Take on the World TV. Till we see you next time. Take it easy. Love you.
Good night.
Shalom.